The year is 1964. The swastika flies over London. Paris is silent beneath the shadow of marble monuments built to celebrate a 1,000-year Reich. In New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty stands headless, dismantled piece by piece, and shipped across the Atlantic as a trophy of conquest. Children in what was once America recite pledges in German. The very air tastes different in this world, heavy with the weight of what was lost and what can never be spoken. This is not a nightmare. This is an alternate reality where one battle, one decision, one moment of hesitation changed everything. What if the Nazis won World War II? In our timeline, the tide of war turned on beaches and in frozen fields. D-Day succeeded, Stalingrad held. The atomic bomb ended the Pacific War before it could consume millions more. By 1945, the Third Reich lay in ruins, Hitler dead in a bunker, his vision of empire reduced to rubble and ash. But history pivots on razor-thin margins. A different weather pattern over Normandy, a delayed Soviet counter-offensive, a breakthrough in German nuclear research. Any of these could have rewritten the fate of humanity. Let's return to June 1944. The Allied invasion of Normandy, the largest amphibious assault in history, teeters on the edge of disaster. In our world, cloud cover broke just enough for paratroopers to drop. Naval bombardment weakened German positions. Luck and courage carried the day, but imagine the clouds never parted. Imagine German intelligence discovered the invasion point days earlier, allowing Rommel to concentrate his panzer divisions at Normandy instead of scattering them across France. The beaches become killing fields. American, British, and Canadian forces are pushed back into the sea. Eisenhower drafts a letter accepting responsibility for the failure, but there will be no second chance. The Atlantic Wall holds. Without a Western front, Stalin's armies face the full might of German military production. The Eastern Front, already soaked in more blood than any conflict in human history, becomes an endless meat grinder. By late 1944, exhausted and overextended, the Soviet advance stalls outside Warsaw. Lend-Lease supplies from America dwindle as public support for the war collapses after the Normandy disaster. Roosevelt faces mounting pressure to negotiate. Churchill, watching his empire crumble, realizes Britain cannot survive another year of V-2 rockets and submarine warfare. The unthinkable becomes necessary. Peace talks begin in neutral Switzerland. The armistice of 1945 doesn't feel like peace. It feels like the world holding its breath. Germany keeps its conquered territories in Western Europe. A devastated Soviet Union signs a treaty ceding Ukraine, the Baltics, and territories east to the Urals. Britain retains its island but loses its empire, carved up between Germany and Japan. America withdraws into isolation, traumatized and divided. The war crimes trials never happen. The camps are liberated only in the eastern territories Stalin controls, and the full horror of the Holocaust remains hidden behind German propaganda for years. The world knows something terrible occurred, but the perpetrators walk free, celebrated as heroes in Berlin. 20 years pass. The world of 1964 is unrecognizable. The Greater Germanic Reich stretches from the Atlantic to the Urals, a superstate built on slave labor and racial hierarchy. Massive construction projects reshape the landscape. Albert Speer's architectural fantasies become reality. Berlin is rebuilt as Germania, a capital city designed to dwarf Rome and Paris, its avenues wide enough to march armies through, its buildings so large they create their own weather patterns. In occupied France, resistance movements are crushed with methodical brutality. The French language is banned in schools. Cathedrals are repurposed as museums celebrating Teutonic heritage. Culture becomes a weapon of erasure. In the east, the territories beyond the Urals become a different kind of empire. Japan, having conquered China and Southeast Asia, faces guerrilla warfare that never ends. The co-prosperity sphere is a lie visible even in propaganda photographs, where Japanese officials stand surrounded by resentful populations waiting for their moment. The Soviet Union, reduced to Siberia and Central Asia, becomes a paranoid fortress state. Stalin died years ago, but his successors continue his purges, certain that traitors and saboteurs hide behind every failure to resist the German juggernaut. The dream of global communism is dead, replaced by bitter survival. Technology advances, but not in the directions we know. Without open scientific exchange, without refugees fleeing totalitarianism to spark innovation, progress becomes compartmentalized and paranoid. German scientists perfect rocketry, but their space program is a tool of intimidation. Satellites that broadcast propaganda and map resistance movements. Medicine advances slowly, its priorities dictated by racial ideology rather than human need. Computing develops not to connect people but to catalogue and control them. IBM punch cards, which in our world help track Holocaust victims, become the backbone of a surveillance state more total than anything Orwell imagined. Every citizen has a file. Every transaction is recorded. Dissent is detected before it becomes action. Daily life in this world depends entirely on where you are and who you are. In Germania, blonde children play in parks built over the graves of those deemed unworthy. They learn mathematics through word problems about artillery trajectories and racial purity. They grow up never questioning why certain people vanished, why certain questions cannot be asked. In occupied territories, people learn to survive through silence. Underground movements preserve banned books, teach forbidden languages in basements, and wait for a liberation that may never come. In America, isolated and diminished, a generation grows up wondering if they could have fought harder, if their grandparents' sacrifice was betrayed. Jazz is banned as degenerate. Modern art disappears. Culture becomes nostalgia for a past that can never return. But totalitarian empires carry the seeds of their own decay. By the 1970s, cracks appear. The racial hierarchy that defines the Reich creates resentment even among supposed master races. Ukrainians who collaborated expecting autonomy remain subjects. French fascists who welcomed German order discover they will never be equals. The economy, built on plunder and slave labor, cannot innovate. Resources from conquered territories flow to Germania, but rebellions drain manpower and morale. The generation that won the war is dying, replaced by administrators who never fought, who only know empire, who mistake brutality for strength. The twist that reframes everything comes from an unexpected place. In 1976, documents surfaced through a Soviet defector. Detailed records of the Holocaust, preserved by German bureaucrats with characteristic thoroughness, are smuggled to the West. The world finally sees the industrial scale of the genocide, the names and numbers, the casual cruelty documented in triplicate. The revelation doesn't spark immediate revolution, but it plants a seed. Young people in Germania, raised on lies about Lebensraum and destiny, confront the truth about the empire they inherited. Some deny, some justify, but some begin to question. The dissent is subtle at first, samizdat pamphlets passed in universities, graffiti that appears overnight and is scrubbed away by dawn. The state responds with surveillance and repression, but the information has spread. You cannot unknow an atrocity. By the 1980s, the Reich faces challenges on all fronts. Occupied territories erupt in coordination, planned through underground networks that spent decades preparing. The Soviet Union, no longer facing an active invasion, begins supporting these movements. America, its isolation finally breaking as a new generation demands engagement, sends covert aid. The empire is vast, but brittle. When resistance spreads in multiple territories simultaneously, German forces cannot suppress them all. The crackdown is vicious, but it is also desperate. Cities burn, monuments topple, and in Germania itself, cracks appear. Junior officers refuse orders. Bureaucrats leak documents. The children of the Reich begin to wonder if 1,000 years was always a fantasy. The end, when it comes, is neither quick nor clean. Empires built on ideology and violence collapse into chaos. The world that emerges from the ashes of the Greater Germanic Reich is not the world we know. Too much has been lost, too many cultures erased, too many people who might have cured diseases or written symphonies or simply lived ordinary, beautiful lives are gone forever. The survivors build something new, but they build it haunted by what was and what might have been. Imagine living in that world today. Imagine walking through cities where the architecture still whispers of domination, where grandparents cannot speak of their youth, where entire peoples exist only in hidden archives. Imagine a world where the Holocaust succeeded to a degree unthinkable in our timeline, where resistance meant death not just for you, but for everyone you ever loved. Imagine the weight of living under a victory built on mountains of corpses. This is why we remember. This is why we study the pivot points where history could have turned differently, not to glorify what was, but to understand how fragile civilization truly is. The distance between our world and this nightmare is measured in weather patterns, intelligence reports, and the courage of soldiers who stormed beaches knowing many would not return. They gave us a future. In this alternate world, that future was stolen. What if the Nazis won World War II? The answer is a world diminished, a timeline where humanity's capacity for evil overwhelmed its potential for grace. But here, in our reality, we know how the story ended. The Reich fell, the camps were liberated, justice, however imperfect, was attempted, and in that knowledge lies our responsibility to remember, to resist, to ensure that the pivot points of our time bend toward light rather than darkness. Because history is not inevitable. It is chosen, moment by moment, by people who decide whether to look away or stand witness. The Nazis did not win, but only because millions of ordinary people decided they would not.